Alright, so you should be trying Unit 11, Day 11 review on your own, but you are at the end of the unit, so this is the first unit of trig, and this is to review everything you've learned so you can get yourself ready for a test, whenever that should happen. If f of x is equal to that expression, evaluate f of 270. Well, it's a function, so they're telling you to plug the 270 in. So f of 270 is equal to 3 times the sine of 270 divided by 3 minus cosine of 270. So we have 3 and 270 divided by 3 is 90 minus cos of 270. Sine of 90 is 1. Cosine of 270 is 0. So 3 times 1 is 3 minus 0 makes the final answer 3. Evaluate cosine of 360. Well, that means the angle has gone around more than once. So if I subtract off an entire circle, that puts me at the cosine of 300. So cosine 300 is in the fourth quadrant. That gives me a reference angle of 60. Cosine of 60 is 1/2. And since we are in the fourth quadrant, it is positive. So positive 1/2. Tan of A is equal to negative square root of 3. Find the value or values of A. Well, anytime they give you a trig value, that means there's two possible answers. So tangent is negative in the second quadrant and the fourth quadrant. So we're looking for this angle and that angle. And the degree that has a tangent of root 3 is 60. So you have a 60-degree reference angle in your second quadrant, making that 120 degrees. And you have a 60-degree reference angle in the fourth quadrant, making that 300 degrees. Write a positive and negative angle that is coterminal with 250. It's already a positive angle, so if you just go around the whole circle again, you'll end up with an angle in the same spot. So just add a whole circle. And that will give you 610 degrees. But if you take that angle and go backwards around the whole circle, you'll end up with a negative coterminal angle. So we're going to subtract 360. And you end up with a negative 110 degrees. Those are not the only two answers. They're just the two answers that are closest in proximity to the 250. You could actually add 360 as many times as you want. You'll get a positive angle that's coterminal that we'll have to take. Terminal side of an angle in standard position contains that point. Find the exact value of the 6 trig functions. Exact value means if we get a square root, we're not simplifying it. We're not changing it to a decimal. The point -9, -12 is somewhere in here. So I am going to connect that point to the origin, mark my angle up here, and create myself a right triangle out of it. So this side is -9. Well, it's technically 9 because distance is positive, but then this way I'll get the positive and negatives right for my trig. And -12 here. So Pythagorean theorem, 9 squared plus 12 squared equals x squared. 81 plus 144. And that's going to be 225. So when we square root it, we end up with 15. All right, 6 trig functions then. Sine, cos, tan. Sine is opposite over hypotenuse, so -12/15. Cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse, -9/15. Tan is opposite over adjacent, so 12/9 when you remove the two negatives. And cosecant is the reciprocal of sine. Flip it over. Secant is the reciprocal of cosine. Flip it over. Cotan is the reciprocal of tan. Flip it over. Convert 10 radians to degrees. Give the exact answer. So if you take the number of radians and multiply by pi over 180, you get degrees. Give exact answer means we are not converting the pi, so we just pretty much have 1800 over pi degrees. Evaluate sine of 8 pi thirds. When you get really good with radians, you won't need to convert it to figure this out, but for right now, we're beginners. So we're going to convert this to degrees first. 8 pi over 3 times 180 over pi. Let's see, 8 times 180, 1,440 pi over 3 pi. The pi's will cancel out. 1,440 divided by 3 is 480. So I am now trying to find the sine of 480 degrees. Well, 480 degrees is more than one whole circle, so I'm going to subtract off my circle. That will leave me with the sine of 120 degrees. That's in the second quadrant. There's 120. That means my reference angle is 60. The sine of 60 is root 3 over 2, and sine in the second quadrant is positive. So our final answer is root 3 over 2. Cosine of an angle is -half. The cosecant less than 0. Find the value or values of A. Well, if all they told us was that the cosine was -0.5, we'd get 2 answers. But since they gave us a second condition about the cosecant, we're going to end up with just one answer. Cosine of a half means we have a reference angle of 60 degrees. Cosine is negative in the second and third quadrants. So it's either one of those two places. But cosecant is the reciprocal of sine. And sine less than 0 means sine's supposed to be negative. And sine is negative down here in the third quadrant. So we're only talking about the angle in the third quadrant. 180 plus 60 more means that we're talking about a 240 degree angle. Number 10, if f of x is equal to 2 tan x plus cos 2x, evaluate f of pi over 6. Well, first thing I'd do is convert it. Again, once you get more comfortable with radians, you won't have to, but for right now, we're going to do that. So I get 180 pi over 6 pi. The pi's will cancel. 180 divided by 6 is 30. So we're plugging in 30 degrees. So function evaluated at 30 degrees is equal to 2 times tan of 30 plus cosine of 2 times 30. Well, I need to do that first. So that makes a 60 degree that I'm finding the cosine of. And then this is going to be 2 times tan 30. Tan 30 is root 3 over 3. Cosine of 60 is 1/2. So we end up with 2 times the square root of 3 over 3 plus 1/2. Those are not nice numbers to add together. We have an irrational square root there, so we are just going to leave the answer in that form. Write the cosecant of a -460 as the function of a positive acute angle. Well, the function doesn't change, so we still have cosecant. What we've got to do is figure out what angle is equivalent to -460. Well, -460 means I went all the way around backwards, and then I went around some more. Okay, that turned it into a circle for me. Then I went around a little bit more. In fact, let's see. If I add the 300 to it, then 360 to it, then that tells me it's 100 more. So let's see. Here's -90 and a little more. It says I am in the third quadrant. I will need a reference angle. So if this is -100 and this is -180, reference angles always go to the nearest horizontal. That makes my reference angle 80. So there's my positive acute angle. That means reference angle. Now, we have to figure out, is cosecant positive or negative in the third quadrant? Well, cosecant is the reciprocal of sine. Sine is negative in the third quadrant, so cosecant is negative in the third quadrant. The terminal side of angle H on the unit circle is in standard position and it contains those points. Find the cotan. Well, if you are on a unit circle, then the x value is the cosine, the y value is the sine. Okay, tangent is sine divided by cosine. So cotan is cosine divided by sine. So we have 5/13 divided by negative 12/13. Keep it, change it, flip it. So 5/13, change to multiply, flip the second fraction, the 13s cancel out, and we end up with a value of negative 5/12. Convert 3400 degrees to a radian measure. So degrees to radians means multiply by pi over 180. So we end up with 3400 pi over 180. Exact answer means the pi stays. I can knock off these zeros by dividing them both by 10. And let's see, 340 divided by 18 does not come out even. So I'm going to do math frac. And I'm going to get 170 over 9, and I'm going to put my pi back on. So while it's, whoops, no, I'll take that degree off. All right, so we were converting to radians, and it's 170 over 9 pi radians. All right, we're converting this one to degrees. To convert to degrees, you multiply by 180 over pi. Pi's will cancel out. 180 times 11 is 1980 over 4. That comes out to be 495 degrees. Evaluate tan of negative 765. They've gone around the circle, looks like more than twice. So we have to unravel and find out where the angle is without going all the way around the horn. So since they went in the negative direction, I am going to go a full circle in the positive direction and add 360. And that puts us at a negative 405 degrees, which is still more than a circle. So I'm going to go in the positive direction, one full circle, and add 360 degrees. And that puts me at a negative 45 degrees. Well, a negative 45 degrees is in the fourth quadrant. The tangent of 45 is 1, and the tangent in the fourth quadrant is negative. So our final answer is negative 1. Use the Pythagorean identity to solve. If the sine of A is 5/13 and located in quadrant 3, find the cosine of A. So the identity that you want to memorize is sine squared theta plus cosine squared theta equals 1. They give you the sine, so you put the 5/13 in and square it. Plus cosine squared theta equals 1. This gives you 25 over 169. Plus cosine squared theta equals 1. Subtract 25 over 169. Cosine squared theta equals 144 over 169. Square root both. Square root of 144 is 12. Square root of 169 is 13. And go back and look at your quadrant. Quadrant 3, that's in here. Cosine there is negative, so our final answer is that the cosine is negative 12/13. That is a review of your first trig chapter.